It all started on a regular Tuesday morning. I had just stepped out of the house, coffee in hand, ready to start my day, when I noticed something strange. My truck, my pride and joy, the one I washed every weekend and kept in perfect condition, was gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd parked it on the other side of the street, or maybe my wife had moved it to run an errand. But after a quick call to her, it was clear. No one in my house had touched it. My stomach dropped. I looked around, even checked with the neighbors, but the truck was nowhere to be seen. Then I saw it, a small, folded piece of paper tucked under the flower pot by the front door. It was a notice from the HOA, the Homeowners Association. In bold red letters it said, "Vehicle violation, truck towed." I stood there for a moment, reading the notice again and again. I couldn't believe it. My truck, legally parked in my own driveway, had been towed. No warning, no phone call, no knock on the door. Just gone. Hauled off like it was some abandoned junk car. I was furious. The notice gave the name of the towing company and a number to call, so I did. The voice on the other end was cold, disinterested. They told me it had been towed at the request of the HOA for being a nuisance vehicle. When I asked what that even meant, they said it was too large, didn't fit the neighborhood aesthetic, and had been reported for multiple violations, all of which were complete lies. I demanded to get it back, and they said I'd need to pay over $400 in fees, for $100, to get my own truck back from my own driveway. I drove to the impound lot, filled with frustration and disbelief. When I got there, I saw my truck sitting behind a chain-link fence like a criminal in a jail cell. It looked fine, untouched, but seeing it locked up like that stirred something in me, a deep anger I hadn't felt in years. I went inside the office and told them I was here to pick up my vehicle. The guy at the desk barely looked at me. He slid a clipboard forward, with a total printed at the bottom, $478.56. I told him this was wrong, that I lived in that house, that this was a mistake. He shrugged and pointed to a sign that said, "No exceptions, nitrogen monoxide refunds." I paid the fee, not because I agreed with it, but because I needed my truck back. But as I drove away, something inside me changed. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined. This wasn't about a truck. It was about control, about some board of HOA members thinking they could dictate every inch of someone's life, and about a towing company happy to profit from it. That night, I sat down at my desk and pulled up the HOA rules. I read every line, every clause, every footnote. No, where did it say anything about pickup trucks being prohibited in driveways? There were vague words like aesthetic standards and neighborhood harmony, but nothing that clearly backed their action. I started digging deeper. I requested meeting minutes from the last 6 HOA meetings. I went door to door asking neighbors if they'd ever had issues. Turns out, I wasn't the only one. One neighbor had their camper towed for overstaying, even though they had a permit. Another had a vintage car towed that was fully registered and drivable, just because one board member thought it looked old. The more I learned, the angrier I got. It was a pattern. The HOA was targeting vehicles they didn't like, and the tow company was cashing in. This wasn't enforcement, it was exploitation. But instead of filing complaints or writing angry letters, I decided to do something bold, something that would send a message they wouldn't forget. I started looking into the tow company. Who owned it, how it worked, what its financials were like. I found out it was a small operation run by one guy who had inherited it from his dad. Business was steady, but not booming. He had a few trucks, a small yard, and contracts with several HOA letters in the area. I found his business profile online, and I made a call. I didn't tell him who I was. I just said I was interested in buying a towing company. At first, he laughed, but then he said he might be open to it if the price was right. Over the next few weeks, we met a few times, casually. I kept asking questions, learning everything I could about his operation. I played the part of a serious investor. Finally, I made him an offer. Cash, higher than he expected, but still fair for a company of his size. He agreed, just like that. I owned the towing company that had towed my truck from my own driveway, and that's when the real fun began. The first thing I did was audit every contract, every policy, every incident report. I wanted to know exactly how they operated. Sure enough, there it was, a contract with my HOA. It had vague language that gave the HOA permission to request tows at their discretion. No checks, no balances, no oversight. I called a meeting with the drivers. I introduced myself as the new owner and laid down new rules. No more towing vehicles from private driveways unless it was a clear emergency or a violation of city law. No more secret deals with HOA letters. No more kickbacks from now on. Every tow had to be justified, documented, and approved by a supervisor. Some of the drivers were thrilled. They hated towing from neighborhoods anyway. Others weren't happy. One even quit. I didn't care. This wasn't about making friends. It was about justice. Then I made my next move. I sent a letter to the HOA board. In it, I stated that the towing company they had used was now under new ownership, and that under my leadership, we would no longer honor towing requests that didn't comply with actual city ordinances or clear written rules. I also attached a detailed account of how my own truck had been wrongly towed, along with a refund. Checked to myself for the fee I had paid. A few days later, I received a response. It was short, defensive, and full of legal-sounding language, but the message was clear. They weren't happy. Too bad. The next HOA meeting was packed. Word had gotten around that I'd bought the tow company. Neighbors showed up with their own stories, demanding answers. I stood up and told my story again, calmly, clearly, and with evidence. Then I showed them the contract, pointed out the lack of oversight, and told them it was over. People clapped. Some stood and shouted. The board tried to regain control, but it was too late. The tide had turned. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. Not because I had won, but because I had taken back control. I wasn't just a guy who got towed. I was the guy who bought the whole damn company to make sure it never happened again. And this was just the beginning. After I stormed back inside that morning, clutching the violation notice with my truck gone and my heart racing, I sat down at the kitchen table and took a deep breath. I wasn't just angry anymore. I felt disrespected. That truck wasn't just a vehicle. It was mine, paid off, parked on my property. How could someone else decide it didn't belong? I started researching every single line in the HOA handbook. I dug into local laws. I looked up everything I could about towing regulations. I wanted to know had they actually broken the law, or were they protected by some twisted HOA rule. It turned out, my HOA had quietly voted in new regulations a few months prior. Ones that specifically targeted oversized vehicles parked for extended periods in visible driveways. They claimed it was to keep the neighborhood aesthetic intact. But here's the twist. They never sent me notice of the change. No email, no letter, nothing. They updated the rules during a 9 a.m. meeting on a Tuesday, when almost nobody could attend. And somehow, they claimed that because my truck extended slightly over the cement line of the driveway, by about 6 inches, it violated the new policy. I couldn't believe it. I called the HOA office, no answer. I sent emails, no response. And when I finally walked into their office, the secretary smiled politely and handed me a copy of the same violation notice. Like it was no big deal. You can appeal it next month at the board meeting, she said flatly. But the towing fee still stands. That's when something inside me snapped. I didn't just want my truck back. I wanted the people who did this to be held accountable. I found the number of the tow company and drove to the lot that same afternoon. There it was, my truck, behind a barbed wire fence like it had committed a crime. The man at the counter didn't smile. In fact, he seemed used to dealing with angry homeowners. For $175, he said. Not even. Looking up for what? I asked, stunned. It was towed from my own driveway, he shrugged. Talk to your HOA. We just follow orders. Who gave the order? I pressed. HOA rep, name's Harold. Calls us every week. I felt a chill go down my spine. How many other people were getting hit with this racket? I paid the fee, got my keys, and drove home fuming. But on the way, I noticed something odd. There was a for sale sign in front of a small commercial property, and next to it, parked neatly under a canopy, were two flatbed trucks with the same name as the company that had just taken mine. That's when the idea hit me like lightning. I didn't want to just fight the system. I wanted to own the system. That night, I looked up the company online. To my surprise, it was a small family-owned operation, nothing too big, just a few trucks, a lot, and a single office. Their business wasn't booming. In fact, the owner, a guy named Doug, had posted just 3 months earlier that he was looking for buyers or partners due to retirement. I couldn't sleep. By morning, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to sue. I wasn't going to wait for the HOA board to review anything. I was going to buy the tow company. That morning, I called the number on the owner listing. Doug picked up, surprised but polite. I told him I was interested in the business. Are you in towing? He asked. Not yet, I said. But I've had a personal run-in with one of your trucks. Let's just say I want to learn the business. Quickly, he chuckled. You're serious? I'm serious. We met that weekend. Doug gave me the tour. It was modest, an office with one assistant to full-time drivers, and a contract with 2 HOA letters in the area. One of them, of course, was mine. He explained that most of their revenue came from towing violations initiated by HOA letters. They'd get a call, dispatch a truck, and haul the vehicle. Then the fee, which ranged from $250 to $600, was collected at the lot. The tow company would keep 80%. The HOA got 20%. I couldn't believe it. So the HOA profits off this too? I asked. Doug nodded. It's pretty common. Keeps their budgets happy. I shook my head. It was worse than I thought. He was asking $85,000 for the business. Equipment, lot lease, contracts, all included. I told him I needed a few days. But I already knew. I was going to do it. I went home and opened up my savings account. I had just enough. A chunk of money I'd set aside for a vacation. Maybe a small rental property down the road. But this was bigger. This was personal. A week later, I called Doug and made the offer. Full asking price. He agreed. We signed the paperwork within a month. And just like that, I owned the company that towed my truck. But I wasn't done, because I knew exactly how I wanted to use it. The first thing I did, I removed my HOA from the list of approved towing clients. No more calls from Harold. No more secret pickups. Then I sent a certified letter to the HOA board, explaining that I was now the owner of the company they had been working with, and that we would no longer honor their towing orders unless they provided written permission from the actual homeowner, not just the HOA. I attached a copy of the contract cancellation. It caused a firestorm. I started getting emails from board members. This is highly irregular. You can't just pull out of a contract like this. But they were wrong. The contract had a termination clause with 30 days notice, which I had honored, legally. They had no power, but it didn't stop there. I took it a step further. I wrote a blog post titled "The Day My Truck Got Towed from My Own Driveway" and shared every detail. From the violation to the discovery of the HOA's kickbacks, I posted screenshots, emails, the tow receipt, everything. It went viral in local Facebook groups. Neighbors started speaking up. Turns out, I wasn't the only one. A woman 3 blocks down had her car towed while she was unloading groceries. Another had her son's truck taken while he visited for Christmas. No warning. No notice. The HOA had been doing this for months. And now, I was in control of the towing. People started calling me the Towing Avenger. Some joked that I should run for HOA president. Others just thanked me for exposing what was going on. But I wasn't looking for fame. I just wanted justice. And I had a feeling this was only the beginning. I didn't waste any time after the paperwork was done. The very next morning, I pulled up to the tow yard not as a frustrated victim this time, but as the new owner. The employees looked confused at first, especially the ones who had seen me argue with them before. But now, I had a clipboard in my hand and the power to make changes. The first thing I did was review every active HOA contract. I found the one with my HOA, and just as I suspected, it had been auto-renewed for years without review or proper oversight. The terms were aggressive, almost predatory. The tow company had full authority to patrol neighborhoods and remove any vehicles without direct HOA approval for each incident. I knew exactly how this had been abused. I held a meeting with the staff and made it clear. Our company was no longer in the business of targeting innocent residents. No more patrolling for ticket quotas. No more towing without photographic proof and permission. From now on, we would operate with transparency, fairness, and decency. I even brought in a new general manager, someone who had worked for a nonprofit towing support organization. He understood community values and respected people's rights. But my real mission was just beginning. I sent a certified letter to the HOA board, notifying them that the contract would be terminated within 30 days unless we renegotiated terms that were fair to residents. I offered to meet them personally and explain the changes. At first, they ignored me. Then they sent back a legal threat claiming breach of contract. That was fine. I had lawyers now too. I was playing a different game than before. Then came the real twist. Through the tow yard's internal documents and old reports, I discovered that my neighborhood HOA board had a financial relationship with the previous tow company manager. Kickbacks. They had been getting perks, gift cards, vacations, even a few under-the-table consulting fees, all for looking the other way while residents got hit with sudden fees, expensive retrieval cost, and unjustified tows. It wasn't just about rules, it was about profit. Armed with this information, I approached a local journalist. I told them the story from the night my truck got towed to the moment I bought the company. I showed them documents, proof of shady deals, interviews with ex-employees. They were stunned. Within a week, my story hit the local news. The national headlines picked it up. The story was too insane to ignore. Man buys tow company that towed his own truck. The headline practically wrote itself. I became a folk hero overnight. People cheer the story of a regular guy standing up to a corrupt system and winning. My phone blew up with interview requests, podcast invites, legal tips from former HOA victims, and even messages from other tow company owners who were tired of the dirty game. But the attention also brought the HOA board under fire. Residents were furious. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Dozens of neighbors, people who had never even attended before, stood up and demanded change. One by one, board members resigned. New elections were held. I didn't even need to run. I had already done my part. Now, with the board cleaned out and the contract gone, the whole HOA system in our neighborhood began shifting. Rules were rewritten. Committees were formed and new safeguards were put in place to prevent abuse. Meanwhile, I expanded the tow company's mission. We started a resident advocacy program, helping people fight unfair vehicle impounds. We launched a hotline for second opinions before any neighborhood tow. We even offered discounted emergency roadside help for local families, veterans, and seniors. My business, born out of revenge, had become something meaningful. But deep down, I knew the real reason I did all of this wasn't just for my truck. It was because I was tired of being powerless. I was tired of being treated like a number, a nuisance, a source of revenue. And I knew I wasn't alone. There were thousands of others just like me who had been steamrolled by petty rules and faceless committees. A few weeks later, I was standing in my driveway again, the same place this all started. I parked my truck right where it used to be. No fines, no warning stickers, no fear, just peace. My neighbor came by and smiled. "You really did it, huh?" I smiled back. "Yeah. I just wanted my truck back, but I ended up taking back a whole lot more." I didn't realize how deep this fight with the HOA would go until I started seeing the ripple effects. At first, it was about my truck being towed. Then it became about control, power, and who really gets to decide what happens in a neighborhood I've lived in for 10 years. The HOA thought they could bully me into backing down by using bylaws and citations. But when I bought the towing company, the tables turned. What I didn't expect was how much deeper things would get. After taking control of the tow company, I made a decision: no more towing from private driveways without clear video or photographic proof of actual legal violation. I put it in writing, had it notarized, and filed it with my lawyer. I also hired a small legal team to review every contract the tow company had, especially the one with my HOA. That's when we found something explosive: the HOA's contract with the towing company. Now, my company had been automatically renewed without a legal vote by homeowners. It had been signed by the HOA president and treasurer, both of whom had financial ties to the former owner of the towing company. This was a major conflict of interest, one that could not only void the contract but also lead to serious consequences for the HOA leadership. My lawyer advised me to keep this quiet while we collected more evidence. Over the next few days, we obtained bank records, communication logs, and internal memos, things that had been buried in paper trails. It was clear now that some members of the HOA board were benefiting financially from ticketing and towing homeowners, often unfairly and without real cause. It wasn't just about my truck anymore. They were profiting off of fear, using the rules to squeeze money out of people. I started reaching out to my neighbors, one by one. I told them what I discovered, and slowly, stories came pouring in. An elderly couple down the street who had their RV towed while they were in the hospital. A young family ticketed 3 times for a trailer that never left their driveway. A single mom charged $800 to recover her car during a snowstorm. These weren't isolated cases. This was a pattern. One evening, I called a community meeting. I used my own garage and backyard to host everyone who came. People stood in the driveway, on the porch, and on the sidewalk just to listen. I brought in my attorney to explain the situation in plain language. When I revealed the conflict of interest between the HOA and the tow company's former owner, people were furious. We held a vote that night, informal but symbolic. Every person in the room voted for one thing: hold the HOA accountable. The next step was to bring it to the annual HOA board meeting, but the board, sensing pressure, tried to cancel it. So we organized a special meeting under the HOA's own rules. We got the signatures, notified all homeowners, and rented out a local community center. When the meeting day arrived, it was standing room only. The HOA board sat behind a long table at the front, looking uncomfortable. I stepped up with the projector, folders, printed documents, everything. I presented the financial records, the contracting consistencies, and the stories from neighbors who had been wronged. It wasn't an attack. It was the truth laid bare. They tried to talk their way out of it, but the damage was done. A new vote was proposed. Remove the current board and elect new members, chosen by the community. It passed with a landslide. I wasn't interested in being on the board, but I did agree to help advise and support them while they transitioned to a more transparent and homeowner-focused leadership. After the new board took over, they immediately canceled the existing towing contract. Instead, they drafted a new policy, one that required a 2/3 vote for any vehicle-related enforcement, and a photographic record filed with the board before action could be taken. It was a massive change. But for me, the most satisfying part came later. Remember the HOA president, the one who had been signing shady contracts and authorizing tows? He tried to file a lawsuit against me for defamation and interfering with HOA operations. But with the evidence we had and the legal backing I built, the case was thrown out within days. In fact, the judge reprimanded him for abusing his position of power. The entire experience taught me more than I ever wanted to know about how HOA letters operate. Many are run by people who genuinely care about their communities, but others become small empires for petty tyrants who think rules give them power over their neighbors. What they forget is that communities are made of people, and when people unite, they can change the game. In the months that followed, peace returned to our neighborhood. No more surprise tows, no more tickets without reason. People felt safer, freer, and less watched. My truck sat in my driveway every day without an issue. But I didn't stop there. I turned the towing company into something better. Instead of preying on neighborhoods, we partnered with small businesses to help with real issues, like abandoned cars or illegally parked vehicles in loading zones. We even started a roadside assistance division, helping stranded drivers with tire changes and jump starts. And the best part, the company became profitable, but not from exploitation, from real service. We earned the community's trust, and that's worth more than any quick buck made by towing someone's car from their own property. People started sharing the story online. It went viral in local groups, then bigger platforms picked it up. Suddenly, I was getting emails from other homeowners around the country, asking for advice, sharing their own horror stories, and looking for ways to stand up to unfair HOA practices. It made me realize that this wasn't just about one truck or one neighborhood. This was about people everywhere being reminded that they do have power, that they're not stuck, that the rules don't belong only to those in charge. They belong to all of us. And sometimes when someone thinks they can tow your rights away, you show them that you can do more than fight back. You can own the whole system. The town buzzed like a stirred hornet's nest. People who had quietly suffered under the HOA's harsh rules for years were finally starting to speak up. They stopped me in grocery stores, at gas stations, even during my morning walks. Some whispered, some shouted, but they all said the same thing: thank you. And not just because I'd bought the towing company, but because someone had finally stood up to the system. But this wasn't the end. Once I owned the company, I saw how deep the HOA's clause went. They had standing contracts with several other small service providers, pressure washing crews, landscaping vendors, even snowplow companies. Many of these contractors were underpaid, overworked, and constantly afraid of losing their contracts if they didn't obey every order from the HOA. So I started reaching out to them. One by one, I offered them better contracts, better pay, more respect. Some were hesitant. The HOA had held control for so long. People were afraid to believe change was really possible, but others, they jumped on board the moment they heard what I was doing. We began to build a quiet alliance. Not a rebellion, not violence, but a network of people who were tired of being bullied. One morning, I received a notice from the HOA. They were calling a special emergency meeting. I showed up, not in work boots and a flannel shirt like they were used to seeing me in, but in a sharp gray suit, clean shave, folder in hand. I walked in like someone who knew what he was doing. They weren't prepared for that. The room was filled with board members, tension in the air. The president of the HOA tried to act in control. He cleared his throat, banged the gavel, and began reading a long-winded explanation about my supposed attacks on the integrity of the neighborhood. When he finished, I stood up and calmly opened the folder. Inside were copies of every violation letter I had ever received, every photo they had taken, every timestamp, and every towing record. Then I revealed something else. A complete list of residents who had received similar letters in the past 5 years. More than 120 families. I'd gone door to door. I gathered signatures, testimonies. Some even gave me recordings of their conversations with board members. A few had phone call recordings that made the room fall silent. The president's hands shook. I kept my tone calm and professional. I wasn't there for revenge. I was there to make them understand. I offered them a choice: reform the board voluntarily, step down and allow for a democratic vote by all homeowners, allow a new board to be formed, with equal representation and fair rules, or face a legal storm unlike anything they'd ever experienced. Some members scoffed, others, visibly shaken, whispered among themselves. A few walked out of the room right then and there. 2 days later, I received a call. A vote had been held. The president resigned. The board dissolved. And for the first time in nearly 2 decades, the community was finally going to elect a new board, one where every homeowner had a voice. We celebrated that night, not because of victory, but because of freedom. Freedom from being bullied in your own home, from being watched, judged, and fined for things like the color of your curtains or how your trash bin was positioned on collection day. Freedom to feel like your home was actually yours. In the months that followed, things changed fast. The new board was diverse. Young, old, different cultures, new homeowners and longtime residents. They rewrote the bylaws with help from a community attorney I had brought in pro bono. They focused on actual safety, real issues, and most importantly, respect. As for me, I didn't stay on the board. I didn't need the power. I had already done what I came to do. I sold the towing company back to its original owner with a condition: no more HOA contracts, unless approved directly by homeowner vote, no more secret towing, no more predatory practices. The old owner agreed, gladly. He'd hated dealing with HOAs too. I went back to my quiet life, but with one big difference. People saw me differently. Not just as that guy with the truck, but as someone who made a stand and actually changed something. One evening, I walked out onto my front porch. My truck was parked in the driveway, clean, polished, proudly sitting right where it belonged. My neighbor across the street waved. I waved back. A group of kids rode past on their bikes, laughing, and I smiled. Because sometimes when the system tries to break you, the best response isn't rage or revenge. Sometimes the best response is to buy the whole damn system and fix it from the inside.